Okay, we've talked about style vibe and the elements of shape, specifically proportion and silhouette. The third category is styling, where you also add elements like color, texture, using contrast, accessories, hair, makeup, layering, and personal touches like cuffing and unbuttoning and all of those little tweaks. In my opinion, the most important concept when it comes to styling and bringing all of these things together is deciding where and how much contrast versus harmony you want to use. I also use tension interchangeably with contrast. You can have contrast versus harmony for lots of elements, but I'm going to go through the biggest ones. As we've already seen, you can mix different style vibes, and the contrast is definitely going to depend on your ratio of how much of one aesthetic do you pair with another. The more drastic the difference between the aesthetics or vibes of a look, the more dramatic or different the overall look is going to be. Think ballet inspired with rock and roll, or sport with evening wear for every day. On the other hand, you can have an outfit that is only one aesthetic or one style vibe. Sometimes this can come across almost as falling flat, but also not if it's your personality and that's what you love and feel good in. A way to make that look feel dynamic and interesting is to use other elements like texture, color, silhouette, playing with proportions. You can really do so much, even with a very focused aesthetic. We talked about contrasting silhouettes, and if you're not into using contrasting silhouettes to create interest in your look, this is where the other elements come in. Color, texture, playing with proportion, mixing styles, and layering and accessories. So it's not to say that you need contrast in all of these elements. It's really just about balancing some with others. Proportion, you can have contrast as well. We already spoke about this, but the more dramatic the difference is, the more there is for the eye to take in. Remember that there are no perfect proportions. It's really all about your own recipe. Now let's get into those other styling elements that don't necessarily exist on that spectrum, but that can play a huge role in determining an interesting look and using pieces from your closet in an interesting way. If you don't want to play around too much with proportion, silhouette, or style vibe, color can be a really, really fun way to add personality. And this doesn't mean you have to have a rainbow of color in your closet. You can use a lot of these ideas with neutrals as well. I'm not going to go huge into color theory here, much like silhouettes. I'm going to take an even bigger step back and give some basic ideas to help you work with what's already in your closet. There are 4 main principles that I like to keep in mind when it comes to playing with color. And like I said, this applies to neutrals too. And a quick note on neutrals. They go beyond black, navy, gray, and cream. There is really a broad spectrum of non-neutrals, if you want to call it. Think of colors like steel blue, olive green, a kind of slate, like a bluish kind of gray, oatmeal, and even, honestly, leopard, zebra print, denim. I consider those neutrals too. So think beyond those classic ideas that we always have. And when it comes to color, I typically prefer to pair interesting colors with these non-neutrals. We often immediately assume that we have to wear color with black or white because it will ground the look, or it's just the more predictable and easy idea. But you can absolutely mix interesting colors with these non-neutrals. A pink with a navy instead of a black or white, or pink with gray, or yellow with olive green instead of gray or a typical black. As soon as you start seeing these non-neutrals as neutrals, it can really open up new ideas within your wardrobe. I also encourage you to understand what a neutral is to you. Maybe you don't like black and white. Maybe you've got a lot of navy that you can start using as your neutral and pairing it with the other colors in your closet. The 4 ways that I like to use color are: number 1, monochrome, or a head-to-toe tonal look. Like I said, you can do this with one actual color, or you could do this with neutrals. You don't have to have perfectly matching colors for this to work. As long as it's within that same color family, whether it's creams, or if you're looking at color, pinks, different types of pinks, you can mix these slightly off tones together and see how they come across. Ultimately, that big visual column of color will be the same. And of course, when you're doing this, in order to create some visual interest in the look and some depth, don't forget to inject some of those other elements like texture, proportion, different silhouettes, style vibes, and layering. And of course, accessories. The next is analogous, and this means to use colors that are close to each other, almost one beside the other on the color wheel. They are absolutely beautiful together. You can do this with neutrals, pairing oatmeals and creams with browns, for example. If you want to do an analogous look and you still want to give the eye a place to rest, this is where those non-neutrals can come in, or of course just neutral. The third principle is contrasting. So instead of having a look with colors from like similar vibes, similar feeling beside each other on the color wheel, you've got a much more bold and high contrast look. So you're using colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. Simply by their nature of being so different, this is going to create a bolder and more interesting look. And again, you don't have to, but if you want to use a neutral in a color contrasting look, then challenge yourself to choose a non-neutral neutral instead of black and white. Finally, a pop or a hit of one color against a backdrop of either similar colors or a monochromatic look. Using this singular hit of color will draw the eye and give it a focal point. You can of course do this with two pieces in the outfit. Texture is another great styling element that falls in this third category. Texture is a great thing to work with when there isn't a lot of variance in the look elsewhere. Texture is often underestimated, and it doesn't have to be complicated. For example, if you're wearing denim and a really fuzzy, nubby kind of sweater, you're playing with texture there. There's roughness in the denim and a really soft, cozy feeling in the sweater. A lot of us already have those pieces in our closet. As with all of the other elements, I don't think there are specific rules that create perfect texture combinations or specific textures that go together. It's going to be trial and error, but the one thing to pay attention to is the visual weight of the textures and how they go together. Color is going to play into this a little bit as well, but don't be afraid to pair unexpected combinations together, like lace and a heavy wool, or silk and leather. There's a lot of self-trust involved, but there's also experimentation involved in the process as well. So just don't be afraid to experiment and see what texture combinations you like. One final word on texture is that it can be added via shoes, belts, and bags. You could add a patent bag, for example, to a look, and that will create instantly more depth. Finally, styling tweaks like cuffing and rolling. This is where you really personalize and make a look your own. And I do think this comes with being comfortable in our clothes and knowing what we like. So again, experimentation. But soon, the more you do it, I find this is where you can come up with a signature style. Here's a list of all of the little styling tweaks you can do. Cuffing or rolling sleeves, layering something over or under, cuffing or rolling trouser hems, tucking, half tucking, or leaving out a shirt hem, adding jewelry, and it's totally up to you when it comes to jewelry if you want to go for a maximalist layered, or if you want to do just a few bold pieces, a bit of both. And also, don't forget to mix your metals here. Totally okay to mix silver and gold. Adding a belt, a bag, or another interesting piece, or an interesting shoe. No, your belt, your bags, your shoes, they do not have to match. If they do, that can feel like a nice and deliberate styling tweak though, and can create a bit of cohesiveness in your look. Adding sunnies and or a hat. Styling your hair a certain way can make a big difference. As I mentioned, it can add volume in terms of proportion, but it can also add a nice slimming juxtaposition and really sleek look. And makeup. Of course, I'm not a makeup guru, but I know that if you're wearing an all monochromatic outfit and you've got a really bold red lip, say, or a very cool dramatic smoky eye, you've just added that touch of personality that your look might need. Also, when it comes to accessories, I also like to add signature accessories in here, and this could be a watch, a pair of heirloom earrings, for example, but this can be a really cool way to build a signature style. Accessories are small, they go with so many things, they have such great versatility, so a watch is a really good one for this, or a family piece of jewelry. So let's look at some examples and isolate just the styling tweaks. In this look, we've got high contrast accessories. The black belt and shoes, yes, they match, so that's a little interesting styling tweak, but they're high contrast with that white maxi skirt. So that creates a really nice visual. But we take in this look as a whole because there's also a bunch of other contrasts happening. We've got contrasting colors in the green bag and the pink and purple shirt, and also her hair contrasts with the whole look. The brown against the white skirt again. She's got her shirt fully tucked in, and finally there's minimal jewelry, likely because there's so much interesting color contrast going on in the look itself. And finally, a really nice texture play with the crochet of the bag. In this look, we've got a pair of high contrast sunglasses, so big contrast play happening there. The shirt is fully tucked in but also unbuttoned, and the cuffs are rolled. So I like this look because we would look at it and say, oh, these are a lot of just basic classic pieces. There isn't a really big proportion play. So it's really these little personal styling tweaks that are making the difference here. There's minimal jewelry, and the belt, shoes, and bag are all a similar color as the trousers. So there's a bit of that cohesiveness going on. In this look, we've got a really nice analogous color play. The blue of the denim, the green of the layered tops works really beautifully. And speaking of layering, that's a nice little styling tweak here too. And no, it's not complicated. It's literally just a shirt over a tank top or maybe a t-shirt. But the reason why it looks so good and feels so cohesive is that the colors between the two are matching in a sense. And I don't want to say matching like perhaps they were deliberately purchased together. You can see that there's a print on the overshirt and the colors aren't exactly the same. But she's using that tonal palette on top to create some interest. There's a little bit of texture play here as well. There's a smoothness to the top, the camisole, as well as the shirt, and a little bit of roughness in the denim. It's definitely a little bit more subtle, but it's there. And I also think when it comes to color, there's a little bit of analogous color play between the green of the tops and the yellow in the shoe. In this final example, we have color being used with that one pop of color in an otherwise neutral look with those really cool trousers. We've also got layering. There's a vest layered over a sweater, which looks really good. And there's also a mix of styles. We have a very chic bag with some utilitarian looking vest and sweater on top, and then this really like wild and interesting trouser. And finally, there's some texture play in there as well. I think the roughness of the vest, the fuzziness of the sweater, and finally the texture of the trousers. It looks like a little bit kind of nubby and interesting. And there you have it. The final category of elements of style. It's long because it comprises a lot of them together and plays with contrast, but I hope it helps you learn how to finish a look and bring a lot of elements together to create a look with your personality. In the next lesson, we're going to apply everything we learned and break down some looks into elements of style. I'll shop my closet for those looks, and hopefully you will do the same in that lesson. If you want homework for this one, again, I would do the same exercise. Look at your inspiration, look at some retailers online that you really like as well, and see how they've merchandised their clothing, and see if you can recognize some of the styling tweaks that they've used, or just some of the elements of style that they're employing as well to merchandise and put their looks together. I'll see you in the next lesson.